So the house that we lived at before we moved here, we had this little neighbor, little probably maybe 4 years old, 4 years old. And for the life of me, I can't remember his name. It had something to do with the rifle, so it might have been like Winchester or Ruger or something like that. I know for sure it wasn't Savage. I would have remembered that. But every time that he saw me outside, without fail, he would just call out, "Hi, neighbor." That was it. That was the whole script. There was no second line. There was no follow-up questions, no elaboration, no "How are you today?" Just, "Hi, neighbor." Sometimes I'd be tinkering in the garage, and he'd come over and stand in our driveway, and I'd hear that little voice, "Hi, neighbor," and he'd be standing 5 feet away, just looking up at me, just being there, not really saying anything else. And I would try so hard to keep that conversation going. "Hey, buddy, how are you doing today?" Stare. "Did you help your mom today?" Stare. "What do you think about that new baby sister?" Stare. Eventually, with complete sincerity, same tone as before, "Bye, neighbor," and he'd scamper off. Thing is, I love that. As awkward as it was for me to try and keep that conversation going with no interaction, as awkward as it was, I loved it every single time. It would make my day. There were days where I'd be tired, where I'd be distracted, or just working on something maybe out in the yard, and I'd hear that little voice from across the fence from his playset, "Hi, neighbor," and it would just make me stop, and it would make me just kind of pause and recenter and refocus. There was something about that. He didn't have anything profound to say. He didn't show up because he had something to offer. He showed up because we were neighbors, and in his world, neighbors show up. What struck me, and if I think about this honestly, I think it was when we were packing up and loading the truck to move away, that I realized I'm going to miss that little guy. I didn't need him to say anything more than, "Hi, neighbor." His presence was enough. It meant something that he came close. It meant something that he crossed our driveway. It meant something that he wanted to be near. Because presence does something. Presence communicates something. Presence forms something. Last week we talked about our mission and our vision to connect people with Jesus, with each other, and with their purpose, and then our vision to transform the Dalles through the love of Jesus, one life at a time. Well, this week we're going to look at the first of 3 core values that we're going to be highlighting. That value is show up. See, presence is the foundation of relationship. Think about a time in a relationship in your life, the relationships that lasted in your life. They're not always the ones where you have the most in common. These are relationships where people keep showing up, not perfectly, not without awkwardness, not always even knowing what to say, but they showed up. At the kitchen table, at the hospital, in the driveway, at a funeral, on a hard Tuesday afternoon, at 10 o'clock when the phone rang, during the mess, not just during the celebrations. See, presence is powerful. Presence says, "I see you. I'm here. You matter. You're not alone." And when presence fades, well, relationships don't usually break dramatically. They just quietly unravel. Usually not because of conflict. It's usually because of absence. See, and if that's true in our everyday relationships with our neighbors, with our family, with our friends, then how much more true is it in the life in our life with God, our life with one another here at FCC? Because most of the time, the place where God begins to heal us, to shape us, to deepen our roots, it's not in the extraordinary times or the dramatic times. It's just in the ordinary act of showing up. Just being here. Being with God, being with each other. Even when we don't have the right words to say, even when life feels heavy or full, even when we don't have a feeling of being spiritual enough, even when we feel a little bit like that kid standing in the driveway with that one simple, sincere, "Hi, neighbor." This is exactly the place where the writer of Hebrews, where he speaks into. When we read the Bible, you need to understand this. We need to remember that we are talking about ordinary people Right? The Bible, we tend to idealize Bible characters as if there's something extraordinary or special, but these are ordinary people. They're not spiritual superheroes. They're people who are trying to follow Jesus in the middle of real life. So the book of Hebrews is written to people who are under pressure. Not just stress, not just busy lives, but pressure. There's social pressure, there's family pressure, and political pressure. There may be economic pressure, pressure to stay quiet, pressure to conform, pressure to blend in, pressure to abandon Jesus and return to Judaism where they'd come from. See, for many of them, following Jesus has cost something. Some have lost friendships. Some have lost standing in their communities. Some have lost work or security. And so the question that they're wrestling with is not an intellectual question. It's emotional and it's personal. Is it still worth it to show up? To show up in worship, to show up in prayer, to show up in community, to show up with Jesus, to show up for one another. See, the writer of Hebrews, he doesn't answer with guilt or with shame. He doesn't say, get it together. He answers with encouragement and with remembrance. He says, let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm. God can be trusted to keep his promises. He doesn't say, hold tightly because you're strong. He says, hold tightly because the one who promised is faithful. This is not a verse about our strength. It's a verse about God's faithfulness. Well, the writer continues. He says, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and to good works. And this word motivate, it's a strong word. It's not just simply a pat on the back. It means to spark or to stir or to ignite. Let us ignite each other to love and to good works. Now, at the risk of using a worn-out illustration, I'm reminded of church camp where I would go as a kid, and inevitably there would be a speaker that would be we'd have like a fireside at night, and there'd be a speaker, and he'd take some tongs and pull a coal out of the fire, and he'd just set it off to the side. And many of you have probably experienced something like this, but he would continue to speak, continue with his lesson, and as time went on, that coal that was glowing brightly when it was removed from the fire just begins to dim, to dull, to cool. And then I've seen it 1,000 times since that around countless campfires, but when that coal is returned to the fire, when you're sitting around a campfire and you see that piece that kind of falls out and you push it back into the fire, right? Anybody ever experienced that around a campfire? You push that dying coal back into the fire and what happens? It reignites, it begins to glow, it begins to give off heat again. See, we need to understand that we are that coal. When we withdraw from the community, we slowly begin to fade and to diminish, to dull, to lose our heat. But when we stay close, that fire is sustained. The author of Hebrews, he continues. He says, let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another. The key word here isn't meeting. He's not talking about meeting. He's talking about neglect. There's a temptation to neglect gathering together. Neglect doesn't happen all at once. It's slow. It's subtle. It's quiet. See, neglect is when we just stop showing up little by little. It's not because we stopped believing or stopped caring, but usually because life got heavy, got busy, or maybe faith got costly. Maybe we just got tired. The writer isn't simply saying, don't skip church. That's not the main message here. What he's saying is, don't do faith alone. Don't try to carry hope by yourself. Don't hold on to Jesus in isolation, because isolation breaks us. Presence restores us. The heart of this message is not be better. The heart of this message is stay together. Hold on to hope together. Don't go through this alone. You encourage each other by being together. Church, we might not face the same pressures that the early church faced in this situation that the writer of Hebrews is responding to. We may not be in physical danger. We may not be at risk of losing our job. But we know what it feels like to be tired. We know what it feels like to be worn down, to carry things quietly, to feel alone in our thoughts, to wonder if showing up even makes a difference. This passage speaks into that place, to the quiet battles the silent discouragement, that inner pulling back, and the slow drift. The response of Scripture is gentle. Don't drift away. Stay close. Stay connected. Stay present. Not because you're strong, but because God is faithful. And we are stronger together. You know, before church buildings, before sermons or songs or ministries, long before any structure of religion existed, there was a garden. Scripture tells us that God walked with humanity in the cool of the day. No distance, no separation, just presence. And what God created in that garden, what he calls good, there was light, he calls it good. There was sun and moon and stars, he calls it good. There was land and sea, it was good. There was vegetation, there were animals, it was good. And then God looks at all of the culmination of what he had created and he says it's very good. And then what we read next is actually kind of surprising because almost immediately after saying that it's very good, there's but it's not good. It's not good for the man to be alone. Are you getting it? That means that the very first problem in the human story was not sin. Sin hasn't happened yet. The first problem, the first not good, is the aloneness. Before brokenness, there was loneliness. Before rebellion, there was isolation. God didn't look at Adam and say, you have to behave better. You have to be more spiritual. You need to believe harder. God looks at Adam and he says, you need someone with you. You need companionship. See, presence is the design of our creation. You were made for withness. You were made to be with God. You were made to be with each other. So when we talk about showing up, we're not talking about attending church events. We are talking about living in alignment with our creation identity. Then when sin enters the world, the very first effect is withdrawal. It's not anger, it's not violence, it's not rebellion, it's just hiding. God calls out, not in anger, but with the ache of a parent who is searching for their lost child. I need you to imagine that. I need you to think about yourself with your kids. If your child was lost, what does that ache feel like? God is experiencing that ache. Where are you, he asks. And this is not, of course, God knows where physically Adam and Eve are. He knows where they are. He knows that they're hiding. This isn't a question about where did you go. This is a question about why did you leave? Where are you? It's about connection. It's the same question that God is asking you and me today. Where are you? If showing up is a part of how God forms us, then it makes sense that there are forces in our lives that try to pull us away from his presence. Some of those forces are actually spiritual forces. They're malevolent. They want to distract you and keep you away from what is best for you. It can be things that are good intrinsically, like career or family, your studies or community service. It can be something that's good, but those forces are just as happy to use addiction, to use isolation, to use illness or hardship. They want us separated from each other and separated from God. And there's more than just spiritual forces. Life itself can be that, can be distracting. It can be kind of the default is just to wander away from that sense of community. Some of those distractions are obvious. Some are more subtle. They creep in quietly. They feel reasonable. They feel like life. I want to name a couple barriers, gently and honestly, because I think these are two of the most common here at FCC. The first barrier is this. It's just that I'm not sure that I really matter here. I'm not sure I matter here. And this one is quiet. It sounds like there are other people who know more than I do. There are people who have been here longer. I'm not a leader. I don't know how I fit in. I have baggage that disqualifies me. I don't have anything impressive to contribute. They'll be fine without me. If that's ever been you, in your mind at any point, I want you to hear this clearly. You matter more than you realize. You matter more than you realize. Not because of what you do, it's because of who you are, what your presence communicates. When you show up, you strengthen the faith of others just by being there. Your worship encourages someone else's courage. Your consistent presence makes someone else feel safe. Your prayers shape atmospheres. Your voice in worship adds to the fragrant offering of praise that we're offering to God. Your hellos and your hugs, they may make someone's day. They make someone feel real and connected. Your story gives people with similar stories hope. Your presence is not small. You matter here, and we need you, not to fill roles, but to fill life. There's a second barrier, and that's just that life is busy, and we're stretched thin. I think this one is especially true for younger families, but for anyone juggling work and kids and errands, school schedules, caring for aging parents, just the pace of modern life. Life pulls us in many directions, and it's not because we don't care. It's not because we don't value connection. It's not because we don't want to grow in our faith, but because everything feels important. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels like it needs us right now. This is where John Mark Comer's wisdom, I think, helps us. He writes this: love, joy, and peace are incompatible with hurry. You simply cannot be present and rushed at the same time. I think we feel that. We know that it's true. Hurry fragments us. It pulls our souls apart. It turns connection into efficiency. It turns presence into performance. But here's the deeper layer. See, we're always being formed. Our habits, our pace, our patterns, these are shaping us. Again, John Mark Comer, in another book, Practicing the Way, he clarifies this dilemma when he writes this. The question is never, am I being formed? The question is, what is being formed? What am I being formed into, and who or what is forming me? In the pace of our lives, if the pace of our lives is shaping us more than the presence of God, then our faith is always going to feel thin. If the demands of life shape us more than the people God surrounds us with, we will always feel like we're running on empty. Over time, and it's almost always over time, faith becomes something we intend to get back to instead of something that we're actually anchored in. What we don't always notice, and usually until much later, is that something in our soul just starts to thin out. It's not dramatic. It doesn't happen all at once, just slowly, quietly. So I need to encourage you that showing up is not just adding one more thing into your life. Showing up is returning to who we are. Showing up is reclaiming our center. Showing up is returning the ember that is you into the community that is life-giving. If you're tired, you're welcome here. If you feel like you don't matter, you matter here. If life has stretched you thin, you can find rest here. If your faith feels quiet, there's renewal here. And if you drifted, there's a way back here. Not because we're perfect, but because we're present with one another and with God. One of the most important things we need to recognize about showing up is this: God does something in us when we're present that cannot happen any other way. Not because this building is magical. You need to understand that it's not being in this building that somehow God moves in you. There is something that happens in the gathering of the saints, in the gathering of the community of followers of Jesus. God has chosen to meet his people in presence. Jesus says this. He says, where two or three gather together as my followers, I am there among them. He doesn't say where two or three are impressive, or where two or three have it all figured out, or where two or three are spiritually strong. Just where two or three gather, I'll be with you. When we show up consistently, honestly, maybe sometimes awkwardly, sometimes tired, there are three things that happen over time. It's not overnight, it doesn't happen instantly, and it's not dramatic, but it's real, and it's steady, and it's deep. First, when we show up, God strengthens our faith. Faith does not grow in isolation. Faith grows in connection. Faith needs voices and faces and stories. It needs worship and prayer and shared life. You can believe alone. You cannot grow in isolation. You cannot become the person God has created you to be by yourself. There's something, I think, sacramental about gathered worship. Something where grace is conveyed in gathered worship. Something that happens when we bring our bodies and our voices, our attention into the same room. The Spirit moves differently in corporate worship than in solitary devotion. Both matter, both are necessary, but they form us in different ways. I think you probably recognize this. I certainly do. When I'm singing a praise song in my car, I like that, but there's something different that happens when I'm gathered with other believers. Have you experienced that? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's something different in the way God's Spirit moves in us when we are together. When we sing together, when we remember together, when we pray together, when we carry each other, when we hear the Word of God together. God's Spirit convicts and comforts and challenges us together. Showing up creates space for God's work in us that cannot happen in any other way. Second, when we show up, we remember who we are. See, the world is loud, and it is constantly shaping us. I quoted John Mark a few moments ago. It's not about whether you're being shaped, but about what's shaping you. See, every advertisement says you are what you lack. Every news cycle says you should be afraid. Every social fade says you are not enough unless you become more, do more, achieve more, appear more. And we don't even notice it, but we're absorbing it. Showing up brings us back. It recenters us. It names us again. It names you as beloved, chosen, called, held, adopted, a son or a daughter of the Most High God. When we show up, we remember who God is, we remember who we are, who we belong to, we remember what actually matters. And we need that reminder, I think, more than we realize. Identity is not a one-time revelation. It's a practice. It's a rhythm. Third, when we show up, we become people of courage. The writer of Hebrews says this: let us hold tightly, for he who promised is faithful. See, the strength to hold on doesn't come from our willpower. It comes from God's faithfulness. And we experience that in community. Courage is not something we generate inside ourselves. Courage is something we receive in the presence of others. There are days when your courage feels thin, and someone around you, someone else's courage will steady you. And there are days when the reverse is true, when someone else is struggling and your courage will steady them. That's why showing up is not small. It's not insignificant. It's why it's not just attending. This is why showing up is not casual. Showing up is how God conforms us and how he transfers courage to us. It's not dramatic courage. It's not heroic courage. It's just daily courage. The courage to keep going, the courage to choose love, the courage to forgive, the courage to heal, the courage to trust God again tomorrow. Here's the beautiful thing. We're not starting from scratch. This is already happening here at FCC. There are people in this church who embody this value. People who are present, people who show up, people who hold others steady, people whose quiet faithfulness has carried this church through seasons of difficulty and joy. You know these people. You know who I'm talking about. See, when I was wrestling to identify and to put words onto the values of who we are as a church, these people are people whose faces I saw. In my mind, as I'm thinking about what it looks like to show up, to be present, these are the people that you think about. And you know, again, you know who they are. If you think about all the different things that take place around here, and you think about when something's happening, who's here, who's part of it, who's participating. These are the ones who show up early and make coffee and unlock doors. They're the ones who notice a visitor standing alone and walk over and introduce themselves. Or who decorate a trunk for Halloween. The ones who anonymously set up tables and chairs for an event, or who teach our kids, or who run the sound slides or live stream. These are the ones who text someone who's been missing and say, "Hey, how are you? Are you doing okay? You want to grab coffee?" They sit with someone in their grief. Not to say something, but just be present. They bring meals. They open their home. They watch each other's kids. They pray quietly during worship for other people. See, the church is being shaped by your presence. Your faithfulness has formed the culture here. This is not a new value that we're introducing. We need to understand that. This is not a new value. This is a value that we are naming because it already lives here. This is who we are. This is who God's forming us to be. This is the kind of church that we want to remain and the kind of church that we want to become more fully. A church where nobody walks alone. A church where showing up is a way of life. If you're new here, or even if you've been around for a little while and you haven't quite stepped in, this is good news for you. There is room for you here. You don't have to arrive impressive. You don't have the right words. You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to have put your brokenness behind you and found that healing to show up. You don't have to be spiritually confident. You don't have to know where to start. You just have to show up. Here's the beautiful part. When you show up, we become more whole. Because the body of Christ is not complete without you. We don't want a church built on a few people doing a lot of things. We want a church with a lot of people doing a few things. Not perfect, not polished, just present. So what does it actually look like to live into this? I'm going to offer a few just really simple, practical starting points, not as obligation, but as invitation. The first of those is probably pretty obvious. The first way that you can practically implement this showing up is to actually show up. Be here on Sunday. Maybe you can't make it every week. Maybe sometimes you need to leave early. Maybe sometimes you get there late. That's okay. But I would encourage you to make it a priority to be here when you can. Your presence matters even if it's not perfect. And although I say this gently, I also want to be clear. Being present needs to be a priority. It doesn't mean that you can't miss sometimes. I understand that life gets in the way. It happens. But if you can't be present, I would encourage you to just simply ask this question. Is my absence a matter of convenience or of necessity? Am I not present because I wanted to catch a game on TV? Or is it because my good friend's in the hospital? Right, do you understand what I'm saying? There's a difference. Is it a matter of convenience or a matter of necessity? Second, practical opportunity is to sit with someone. Again, this is not difficult. Sit with someone. And don't just sit near someone. It doesn't help if they just happen to be a couple, 3 chairs down from you. Sit with people. Learn a name. Ask a couple questions. Get a cup of coffee. Look around you. Look around you right now and identify somebody that you don't know. Go ahead, I'm going to give you a time. Look around and see somebody that you don't know. Now, I'm not going to say go up and talk to that person right now. Like, that's the most awkward thing we do in church. But there are people around you that you don't know. Maybe you know a name, but I bet you can find somebody whose name you don't know. I'm going to make it easy for you, actually. We're having lunch together. We're going to share a meal here in a few more minutes. I'm going to encourage you I know how easy it is to say, to get your food. You're going to get that bowl of chili and that baked potato, and you're going to say, who do I know? Who do I know? And you're going to go sit with that person you know, right? Because conversation is easy with that person you know. But here's my challenge. Don't. I want you to sit with somebody that you don't know, or sit with someone that you don't know very well. I mean, spouses you can pair up. That's fine. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that let's get out of the comfort, the easy. Let's go hang out with the group that we always hang out with, the clique that we love, right? That's easy to do, and that's important. I'm not telling you to abandon your friends, but connection and community happens as we expand that connection, as we connect with each other and even with people that we don't know. Proximity becomes presence when we choose to engage. Number 3, say yes to one thing beyond Sunday. So a practical step in implementing what I'm talking about today is to say yes to something beyond Sunday. Might be a small group, might be a service opportunity or a meal together. Not 10 things, not a lot of things. Just say yes to one thing. Maybe it's a women's lunch. We did that, I think, just this last weekend. Right? This coming weekend, men, on Saturday, 8 o'clock, we have a men's breakfast. See, depth happens in smaller spaces. Life on life happens when we move beyond the rows that we're sitting in into circles, round tables, face to face. 4th, notice who's missing. There are probably people that are not here today. If you think about it, if you look around, people that are not here today and maybe have been gone for a couple weeks. If you notice someone like that, if you notice that I haven't seen somebody in a couple weeks, maybe you just need to check in with them. Send a text or make a phone call. Not with guilt, just with care. Hey, I haven't seen you around recently. Just wanted to check in. Are you doing okay? This simple act says you are missed and that you matter, that you belong, that your absence is felt. 5th practical step is to bring someone with you. Showing up is powerful, but showing up with someone multiplies that power. Invite a neighbor or a coworker or a friend who's been curious. Offer to meet them outside and to come in with them. Like, it's one thing to invite your friend to church because it's still really hard for somebody to walk through the doors of a new place without knowing anybody or even expecting to find you inside. So if you're going to invite someone, bring them with you. If you drive separately, meet them outside, bring them in, introduce them to people. Connect them, show them where to get coffee. Show them what to expect. Show them where to find the communion cups. Show them where to check their kids in. See, these aren't complex strategies. There's nothing in there that any one of you can't do, any of them. These are simple rhythms of presence. But when we practice them week after week and month after month, they shape us into a community where nobody walks alone. So, church, when we talk about showing up, we're not simply talking about attendance. We're not talking about obligation. We're not talking about adding more to your schedule. We're talking about living into who we were made to be, living into our purpose. We were created for presence. We were created for connection. We were created to walk with God in the cool of the evening and to walk with each other. It's our design. It's our calling. This is our identity. Here at FCC, we show up for God. We show up for each other. We show up because presence matters. We show up because love takes time. We show up because no one should walk alone. This is who we are. This is who we want to be. This is who God is forming us into together. Whether you've been here for decades or you're just beginning to step in, or if you're somewhere in between, there is a place for you here. You're wanted here. You're needed here. And your presence carries weight here. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. My hope this morning is not that you walk out feeling pressure. My hope is that you walk out feeling invited. Invited to belong, invited to breathe, invited to be known, to grow in the slow, steady rhythm of grace, invited to show up just as you are. When we show up, even imperfectly, God meets us there. He forms us, and He strengthens us together.